This is his last project with us. We're letting him go." Blake's words knocked the wind out of me. My presentation clicker froze in my hand as 30 pairs of eyes turned my way. Blake Hutchins, my VP of only 4 months, had just announced my termination right in the middle of my presentation to our biggest client. I'm Hudson Garrett, 47 years old, and this was not how I'd planned to spend my Thursday night. Standing there under the harsh lighting of Patrick Winter's private dining room, watching my career get executed somewhere between the main course and dessert. "Please continue, Hudson," Blake said with that plastic smile. "Let's not waste Mr. Winter's time." My body went on autopilot. Voice stayed steady as I explained how our new acquisition strategy had cut operational costs by 31%. The numbers were rock solid, the strategy bulletproof. 18 years of dedication to this account, and this is what I got: public humiliation for dinner. When I finished, there was applause. That awkward kind you hear at wakes. Patrick Winter, worth about $2 billion but still buying his suits off the rack, hadn't taken his eyes off me since Blake's little announcement. Staff started clearing dessert plates when Patrick leaned over. "Could I speak with you outside for a moment?" Out in the cool air, away from all those stares, Patrick studied me like he was sizing up a business deal. That was completely unprofessional, especially considering your strategy just saved my company millions. "Appreciate you saying that, Mr. Winter. What the hell happened in there?" I laid it out for him. How things went sideways after Blake got promoted. How he wanted me to massage the quarterly numbers for the board. How I told him no. "Numbers either tell the truth or they lie, Mr. Winter." I picked truth. He nodded slow. "I respect that. How would you like to apply those principles on a bigger scale?" Turned out Patrick wasn't offering me a job. He was a managing partner at Apex Advisory Partners, some venture fund that backed industry research and reform work. "We fund people who want to fix broken systems," he said. "Your approach to accountability could have wider impact." Behind us, gravel crunched as Blake came rushing across the parking lot in his expensive shoes. "Everything okay out here, Mr. Winter?" "Fine," Patrick said, cool as ice. "Just offered Hudson our senior advisory position, the one that evaluates corporate governance for potential acquisitions." Blake's face went white. "Advisory position?" "The kind that looks into systematic business problems," Patrick said. "Hudson's expertise on projection ethics would be valuable for our due diligence." Let me back up here. Name's Hudson Garrett, and until that night, I was Senior Strategy Director at Hutchins & Associates, mid-sized consulting firm I'd helped build from nothing after my Marine service and MBA. Picked this place over bigger offers because the old CEO promised real mentorship and growth. For 18 years, I delivered. My team consistently hit targets. Client retention rate of 89% when industry average was 68%. Winter Industries was my crown jewel. Built that relationship from a small project into our biggest revenue stream at $12 million annually. Here's what Blake didn't know when he torched my career. I document everything. Every late night developing strategies. Every time he asked me to cook the books for stakeholders. Every instance where he stole credit for my work. The trouble started when our CEO retired and the board brought in Carolyn Hayes from outside. She was all about numbers without understanding our culture. Within a month, she promoted Blake over better candidates, including me. Word was they'd worked together before. Blake immediately went to work on me. Impossible deadlines first, then important meetings I somehow didn't get invited to. Finally, he reassigned my best people. Classic corporate hit job. The breaking point came when he demanded I adjust projections for the board meeting. "The new client acquisition costs are what they are," I told him. "We can't promise growth based on fantasy." Blake leaned back in his chair. "You need to be a team player, Hudson. Carolyn wants growth numbers. Based on what exactly?" His tone went cold. "If you can't support our direction, maybe this isn't the right place for you anymore." I should have seen that dinner coming. But getting executed in front of 30 people still caught me off guard. Throughout the whole meal, I'd been running numbers in my head. How long my savings would last, maybe 3 months, 4 if I was careful. Both kids in college, and the divorce had already hit my finances hard. But Patrick Winter's offer changed the game completely. Standing in that parking lot, watching Blake's confidence crumble as he realized what was happening, something clicked. This wasn't just about saving my own skin anymore. This was about fixing a system that was fundamentally broken. The Apex advisory position came with real resources and a platform that mattered. I'd be evaluating companies for potential acquisition, which meant access to their internal operations and books. The pay was better than my current salary, but the real value was influence. I'd need complete independence, I told Patrick. That's exactly what we provide, he said. Freedom to examine whatever problems you identify. Blake cut in, voice tight. Mr. Winter, maybe we should discuss your service needs for next quarter. Hudson's departure means we'll need to restructure our approach. Patrick shut him down cold. Actually, I'm putting all expansion plans on hold until I see how this leadership change affects your service quality. That's when I knew this was going to be interesting. 2 months later, I started my advisory role at Apex. First assignment was evaluating mid-size consulting firms for potential acquisition. Perfect fit, considering my background. I interviewed executives across the industry, gathering intel on how projection manipulation and billing tricks were screwing up market integrity. I didn't name Hutchins & Associates specifically, didn't need to. The patterns were everywhere, same playbook, different companies. But when I submitted my preliminary findings to Apex, people in the industry started connecting the dots. Meanwhile, Blake was drowning. Without my strategies and relationships, the Winter Industries account started falling apart. Patrick had quietly cut their engagement by 60%, citing concerns about current leadership methodology. Blake was scrambling to figure out what hit him. 6 months into my advisory role, I got an unexpected visitor. Carolyn Hayes wanted a meeting at my new office. She looked uncomfortable sitting in my visitor's chair, probably not used to being the one asking for favors. "You've stirred up quite a hornet's nest," she said. "Your reports have board members asking uncomfortable questions." "Good questions usually lead to better business," I replied. She leaned forward. "Look, mistakes were made. We both know Blake went too far. What would it take to bring you back?" "Name your price." The offer was everything I'd wanted 6 months ago. Senior partner, big compensation bump, even a board seat. But I'd seen something bigger than just getting my old job back. "Not interested in coming back," I said. "I'm interested in changing how this whole industry works." Her face darkened. "Sounds like a threat." "It's a promise. Transparency isn't optional anymore." After she left, I sat there thinking about how the old Hudson would have jumped at that offer. The new Hudson had different priorities. What Carolyn didn't get was that I wasn't out for revenge against one person or company. I was building a case for systematic reform. My reports to Apex were becoming the foundation for new industry standards that would require transparency in projection practices and billing. But the real test was coming up. I'd been invited to speak at the National Consulting Leadership Summit. Blake would definitely be there. First time I'd faced the guy who thought he'd ended my career. He had no idea what I'd been preparing for the past 8 months. 3 days before the summit, I got an anonymous message. "Blake knows you're speaking. He's planning to discredit your findings. Watch yourself." The summit was at the Grand Regency Hotel. Walking into that lobby brought back memories of similar events where I'd attended as Blake's subordinate, standing in his shadow while he took credit for my work. Today was different. Today, I was a featured speaker. My presentation was scheduled for the final day. Second day, I watched Blake work the room, glad-handing and networking. Company's performance had tanked since I left, but his political skills were still sharp. During a panel where Blake was speaking, the moderator asked about ethical projection practices, right in my wheelhouse. "We've always maintained the highest standards," Blake declared, making eye contact with me in the audience. "Some former employees might suggest otherwise for personal reasons, but our track record speaks for itself." Several people turned to look at me. I just smiled and kept taking notes. After the panel, Patrick found me in the hallway. Subtle as a brick, wasn't he? About as subtle as my termination speech. Patrick had that amused look. "Ready for tomorrow?" "More than ready." "Good. Because the organizing committee added someone to your panel last minute." He paused. "Carolyn Hayes." My heart rate kicked up a notch. Both Blake and Carolyn would be there, positioned to tear apart everything I'd built. But honestly, I felt calm about it. "Perfect," I said. "More people will hear what needs saying." That evening, another message came in. "Check your presentation file. It's been altered." Sure enough, my slides had been tampered with. Key data points changed to make my conclusions look false. If I'd used that file, I would have presented wrong information and destroyed my credibility instantly. I restored the correct data and added security measures. Then I did something they wouldn't expect. created a second presentation file, and left it accessible on the conference system, a decoy. Next morning, the ballroom filled fast. My session on transparency and consulting had generated serious interest after my Apex reports. As I set up equipment, Blake walked in with Carolyn. They grabbed front row seats. "Need any tech help?" Blake offered loudly. "These conference systems can be tricky." "Got it covered," I said. "Thanks for the concern." When they announced my name, the applause was solid. My work had resonated throughout the industry. I connected my personal device instead of using the conference system, bypassing their sabotaged file. "Good morning," I began. "For the past 8 months, I've been analyzing how projection manipulation and billing irregularities damage market integrity. Today I'll share findings and actionable solutions." As I went through my presentation, Blake looked confused. He'd expected me to use the tampered file. His planned gotcha moment when I'd present false data wasn't happening. During Q&A, Carolyn raised her hand. "Mr. Garrett, your research suggests widespread manipulation. Isn't this simply optimistic forecasting rather than deliberate deception?" "Great question," I replied. "The difference is in pattern and intent. When adjustments consistently favor the presenter despite contrary evidence, when those making adjustments benefit directly, and when objections get silenced, that's not optimism, that's manipulation." The audience murmured agreement. Many recognized these scenarios from their own experience. Blake's turn. "Your methodology seems questionable. You've cherry-picked examples that support your narrative while ignoring standard industry practices." I smiled. "Actually, I analyzed practices at 127 firms across 6 industry sectors. Statistical correlations are clear. Which specific methodology aspect concerns you?" He'd expected to challenge false data, not solid methodology. Sample size seems inadequate. 127 firms inadequate? Standard for similar studies is 35 to 40. I paused. "But you're right that more data helps. That's why I'm announcing today that Apex Advisory Partners is launching an industry-wide certification program." This was my surprise announcement. A voluntary program where consulting firms could submit to transparency audits in exchange for certification. Firms that passed would get ratings visible to potential clients. Let the market drive ethical behavior when clients have the information to make smart decisions. I explained how the certification would work, the standards involved, and benefits for participants. In the current climate, firms would face pressure to participate. Refusing would raise red flags with potential clients. Blake's face went dark as the implications hit him. After my presentation, attendees swarmed me with questions and interest in the program. Across the room, I saw Blake and Carolyn in intense conversation, shooting glances my way. As the crowd thinned out, Sophie Rivera approached carefully. She'd been one of my team members before Blake reassigned her. "That was incredible," she whispered. "Things have gotten much worse since you left. The new projections are complete fantasy." "You documenting the changes?" I asked quietly. She nodded. "Everything. But Blake watches us closely now. Anyone who worked with you is considered suspect. Stay careful," I warned. "This isn't finished yet." That evening, I got an invitation to meet with the summit's executive committee. Walking into the meeting room, I found Patrick and 4 other industry leaders waiting. "We want to discuss accelerating your certification timeline," the committee chair said. "Recent developments have created urgency." "What developments?" Patrick slid a folder toward me. "Whistleblower submitted materials this afternoon concerning systematic fraud at several consulting firms, including Hutchins and Associates. Inside were printouts of internal communications, dozens of exchanges between Blake and Carolyn explicitly discussing how to manipulate projections and inflate billing hours. The evidence was damning." "Where did this come from?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "Anonymous submission, but thoroughly verified," the chair replied. As I reviewed the documents, I realized they contained information only someone with high-level access could have. Someone very close to Blake and Carolyn had turned against them. The committee wanted to announce the certification program immediately, with implementation beginning next quarter instead of next year. "We need to get ahead of this," one member insisted. "If these practices get exposed without solutions in place, client confidence will collapse." I agreed to the accelerated timeline, knowing it would catch firms like Hutchins and Associates completely unprepared. As the meeting wrapped up, Patrick held me back. "Something else you should know. Hutchins and Associates board is meeting tomorrow morning. Emergency session. My pulse picked up. Because of the whistleblower materials, among other things. Their second largest client just announced they're reviewing all consulting relationships. Market confidence is already shaking. Things were moving faster than I'd expected. Next morning, I watched from my hotel as news broke. Patricia Knox, chairperson of Hutchins and Associates board, called an emergency press conference. At 2 p.m., I stood in the back of the press room as Patricia announced the immediate termination of Blake Hutchins and Carolyn Hayes, pending investigation into systematic billing fraud and projection manipulation. Then she said something that blindsided me completely. The board has unanimously appointed Hudson Garrett as interim CEO to lead our reform efforts. His expertise in ethical business practices and intimate knowledge of our operations make him uniquely qualified to guide us through this transition. Cameras swung around, searching for me. Patrick nudged me forward. "This wasn't our deal," I whispered to Patricia as I walked to the podium. "Plans change," she whispered back. Board vote was unanimous. Standing there facing the press, the full circle hit me hard. 8 months ago, I'd been publicly humiliated and fired. Now I was the appointed leader of the same company that had tossed me aside. I addressed the reporters with measured confidence, outlining immediate transparency measures and investigation protocols. During Q&A, I spotted Carolyn slip into the back of the room, her face pale as she watched her empire crumble. After the press conference, she approached me quietly. "You planned this from the beginning," she accused. "From the moment Blake announced your termination, you orchestrated everything. Winter's offer, the advisory position, the certification program. You set us up." I looked at her calmly. "No, Carolyn, you set yourselves up. I just refused to compromise my principles. You expect me to believe this wasn't calculated revenge? What would revenge accomplish?" I asked. "Destroying the company would hurt thousands of innocent employees and make me unemployable in the process." "That's not strategy, that's self-destruction." I stepped closer. "My revenge wasn't destroying you. It was building something better despite you, creating systems where people like you can't succeed using your methods." As board representatives escorted her away, I felt the weight finally lift from my shoulders. My vindication wasn't in her downfall. It was in the transformation their actions had sparked. Later that evening, as I prepared for my return to the company, Patrick visited my room. "Congratulations, CEO Garrett, though I'll miss having you at the advisory firm." "It's temporary," I reminded him. 90 days to stabilize operations, then back to fund work." "Maybe," he said thoughtfully. "Or maybe this is exactly where you need to be to create lasting change." You knew this might happen, I realized. From the beginning. The advisory position, the research, the certification program, you were positioning me for this. Patrick shrugged. "I recognized potential in both you and the situation. When Blake announced your termination at that dinner, his arrogance revealed vulnerability. The rest was creating conditions where truth could emerge safely." That night, as I reflected on everything that had happened, I understood what had really occurred. It wasn't quick or destructive revenge. It was patience. Building credibility while they undermined themselves, creating systems that made their behavior impossible rather than just punishing it, transforming humiliation into expertise that others recognized as valuable. Most importantly, it wasn't about finishing them. It was about finishing what they'd tried to stop me from achieving. The next 90 days were intense. Walking back into Hutchins and Associates as interim CEO felt surreal. Same building, same conference rooms, but completely different dynamics. Former colleagues who'd watched my public humiliation now reported to me. Some were genuinely happy about the change. Others were nervous about what I might know. First order of business was damage control. We'd lost 3 major clients in the fallout, with annual revenues down 22%. The Winter Industries contract was hanging by a thread. Patrick was giving us one last chance to prove we could operate with integrity. I brought in an external audit team to examine our billing practices. What they found was worse than I'd expected. The automated billing inflation wasn't just 15%, it was tiered by client size. Small clients got hit with 12% markups, mid-size clients 18%, and major accounts like Winter Industries were being overcharged by 23%. The forensic accountants estimated we'd overbilled clients by approximately $8.7 million over the past 3 years. Blake and Carolyn's little scheme had been systematic theft, plain and simple. We immediately implemented full billing transparency. Every client got detailed breakdowns of actual time spent versus billed time. We issued refund offers to affected clients. Some took the money, others appreciated the honesty and stayed with us. Winter Industries decided to expand their engagement after seeing our new standards. The certification program launched 6 weeks ahead of schedule. 43 firms applied for the first round of audits. Hutchins and Associates was obviously the first to get certified. We had to prove we could meet our own standards. By month 3, our client retention had stabilized at 91%. New business was picking up as word spread about our transparency standards. Turns out there was real demand for ethical consulting when clients could verify they were getting what they paid for. The board meeting to discuss permanent leadership happened right at the 90-day mark. I'd planned to recommend an external candidate and return to Apex, but the numbers told a different story. Revenue was up 15% from the previous quarter. Client satisfaction scores had jumped to industry-leading levels. Employee morale was the highest it had been in years. "The board would like you to stay permanently," Patricia Knox said after the formal vote. Unanimous decision. I thought about it for exactly 10 seconds. I accept. 2 years later, Hutchins and Associates had become the industry gold standard. We'd grown from 127 employees to 189. Annual revenue had increased by 34%. The certification program had expanded to 312 participating firms across North America. Blake never recovered professionally. Word gets around in consulting circles, and his reputation was toast. Last I heard, he'd moved to Phoenix and was selling commercial real estate. Carolyn quietly retired with a minimal severance package after the board threatened criminal charges. Sophie Rivera became my VP of Operations. She'd been instrumental in documenting the billing fraud and deserved recognition. Several other team members who'd stayed loyal during the transition got promoted to senior positions. The industry transformation exceeded my expectations. The certification program became mandatory for any firm wanting to bid on Fortune 500 contracts. Billing transparency wasn't just good ethics anymore, it was a competitive requirement. My kids finished college debt-free thanks to the CEO salary and performance bonuses. My daughter graduated with her MBA and joined a consulting firm, one with certification, of course. My son became an engineer and regularly jokes about his old man who took down corporate corruption with spreadsheets. Patrick Winter and I developed a strong business relationship. Winter Industries became our anchor client, and Patrick joined our advisory board. Apex Advisory Partners ended up acquiring a 15% stake in Hutchins and Associates, giving them a permanent foothold in the consulting reform movement. The personal satisfaction was deeper than I'd expected. Every time a client thanked us for honest billing, every time a competitor adopted our transparency standards, every time a young consultant asked about ethical business practices, it reminded me why the whole thing had been worth it. 6 months ago, I got invited to speak at the same hotel where Blake had announced my termination. The National Consulting Leadership Summit wanted me to present a case study on industry transformation. Standing at that same podium where I'd announced the certification program, I reflected on how far things had come. During the Q&A, a young consultant asked, "How did you maintain focus on systemic change instead of just getting personal revenge?" "Revenge is about the past," I told him. "Building something better is about the future." When someone tries to destroy your career, you have 2 choices: destroy them back or prove they were wrong about you. I chose to prove they were wrong. After the presentation, I walked past the same private dining room where my career had been publicly executed. The hotel had renamed it the Winter Conference Room after Patrick's donation for renovations. That night, sitting in my hotel room, I thought about that dinner 3 years ago. How Blake's arrogance and Carolyn's greed had accidentally created the conditions for industry-wide reform. How their attempt to silence ethical concerns had amplified them instead. The best part wasn't that I'd beaten them. The best part was that thousands of consulting professionals now worked in an industry with higher standards. Young consultants wouldn't face the same pressure to compromise their principles that I'd faced. Clients could trust they were getting honest service. Sometimes your greatest setbacks really do become your greatest opportunities. You just need the patience to see beyond the immediate anger to the long-term possibilities. Success isn't about destroying people who hurt you. It's about building something better than they ever imagined possible. That's the real victory. Not just winning, but changing the rules of the game so everyone wins.